The gravity of the time is such that every new avenue of peace, no matter how dimly discernible, should be explored. Never before in history has so much hope for so many people been gathered together in a single organization. You will provide a great share of the wisdom, of the courage, and the faith which can bring to this world lasting peace for all nations and happiness and well-being for all men.
Hi, I'm Maddie Hibbs-Magruder, and you're listening to another episode of Titans of Nuclear. Today, we're here with Dr. Nils Diaz, who's a former chairman of the U.S. NRC and a prominent figure in the nuclear space. Nils, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Terrific. And we can go ahead and get started. I'd love to hear a bit more about you as a person. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Cuba 2 years ago. The reality is I went to school at the University of Villanova in Havana. It was an American university in Havana. I was the only one that kept working during the revolution, and I finishing in there. It just happens that my major professor and tutor was actually a nuclear physicist. His name was Dr. Marcelo Alonso. He eventually came to this country, became a very famous professor in the several universities in this country. But he kind of took me under his tutelage and started to teach me the let's just say the basics. And I went to work with him actually in the National Bank, and his field included whatever was going to be done with electricity. And the first thing that happened after the revolution was that, of course, there was not enough electricity. And General Electric came and proposed to build a 60 megawatt electrical reactor in Havana, just like the one in Vallecitos, California. And we kind of accepted that. And that's how I started my connection with nuclear energy. Of course, I didn't know anything, but I've taken like 3 courses in the basics of it. And that's how it got started on how do you actually design, place, set up all the things that are needed for operation, from transmissions line to everything else. And that was essentially my first year after I finished school. I was dedicated to that, and then it changed.
Interesting. So you didn't have, beyond some classes, you didn't have any kind of more formal training in nuclear engineering? It was mostly all on the job?
Yeah, mostly all. I had 3 courses in the basics of nuclear engineering, and that was about it. The careers in there were different. There were 5 years, and you have to do projects. And so my project became taking a look at how to design a nuclear power plant, or learn from people that have done it, what are the things that you have to do. And so that's how I got started. Eventually, my major professor left the country just like everybody else was leaving Cuba, and I was left behind. And so I inherited a bunch of other major projects. Because of the main reason that my brother was coming in the Bay of Pigs invasion, I stayed in Cuba until the Bay of Pigs invasion came in. And so I was able to somehow at a very young age, was able to see how projects get developed and so forth. And then I kind of escaped Cuba. Actually spent 7 months in an embassy under political asylum, and then eventually was released to the Mexican government, and they put a military plane, picked me up and dropped me off. And well, first in Mexico, but later on, I went to Panama and then to Miami.
Interesting. And in this phase of your life, as you were starting to get more experience with nuclear energy, did you have any hesitations about it? Or did you see it as like a big necessity for getting baseload power?
I didn't know enough to have any hesitations about it. I just I just thought it was going to be great, and it has been or should have been. And I just took it as that. So I came to this country and I started to work as what I really knew, which was design. I was a designer, plant design. And then, but that brought me very close to the University of Florida, where my brother had actually graduated with an engineering degree. And being there, I met this incredibly good and talented nuclear engineer or physicist at the time, and he, proposed that I just drop what I was doing and start learning again. And that's what I did. I went to school beginning in October of 1962, and then got my master's. And then when I was going to leave the university because I had to feed my family, they offered me a job to stay there. And in 1966, I became a faculty member 4 years before I got my PhD. So it's kind of new, but obviously I have made myself useful, which is not a bad idea for a student.
Definitely.
And so I was able to stay at the university, do my PhD, and then became an assistant professor at the time, 1969.
So you had a lot of exposure to real projects early on in your career, then going more academic. How would you kind of compare the two? Do you see them as necessarily linked, or are you more in favor of the project development side, like actually putting these plants online?
They are necessarily linked. You learn a lot of things that you wouldn't know if you would just be doing projects. So when I finished, I really started a dual career. My dual career was being a professor, and the other career was very quickly. I became a consultant, and my consulting was in finishing nuclear power plants that were being built and they're having problems, and they were needing people with, in my case, knowledge of the nuclear components and part and regulations and law, and actually the process of design. So I was a very strange professor. I practically spent only a third of my time at the university, and the rest of them I spent it in industry working.
That's a terrific balance. I'm sure you also brought a lot of real world experiences back to the classroom that would be really valuable.
I really think so. And in fact, one of the things that I did after 5 years of being out there is I transformed the curriculum to be more engineering. What I actually did is look at what do students need to know when they get out of here. Mm-hmm. They can afford 2 years learning everything. So I created 3 courses, a nuclear design and technology course, a nuclear operations course, and an integral nuclear course that look at all of those things together. And the students just loved it. The fact of 50 years afterwards, if I meet one of them, which said not many of them alive, I have outlived them all, the bottom line is they say, those were the only courses I ever used. I didn't use any of it. But of course, that's not true. They actually have learned some of the basics of all of the things I needed to do. But yes, I actually went into the industry before I did that and became a senior nuclear reactor operator. So I spent months in all of the vendors, and I trained with senior reactors operators. And then I became a consultant for all of those vendors. and that link was so strong that it kept throughout my life. And it still does. I still keep those connections and things. It is just a matter of what do you do when you leave college? Exactly. These are the kind of things that people do. How can I make it easy? And how can I learn more so I can teach better? And eventually they complement each other. You start going deeper and deeper into things that are actually what people do outside. And so I became, mostly a consultant, spent
That's terrific. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. What was kind of either, let's start with your like the most exciting problem that you got to solve.
Gosh, early in the career because
Actually, let's take a look at the entirety of your time as a consultant. Yeah, which was like the most exciting problem, or the one you still think back to as, oh man, I kind of wish I was back solving that. That was a really cool challenge.
Yeah. Well, I got simple problems that were as obvious as not having the right person in the right place. And at the time, the nuclear industry was using a pool of people that some came from schools, some came from the submarines, some came from industry. And many times when I found people that had problems, it's because they had the wrong person at the wrong place. It was really an issue that came over and over again. And found out that it required a better educated person, not only in the things of science, but in the things of how you make things work, how you make organizations work, how organizations get funded in doing things better so they can do things better, how to avoid the pitfalls of keep doing the wrong thing. And so we developed a team that I had that were like 5 people that we go into different places at different times and just try to get the right things going. I mean, there's some people having problems with the NRC. So I have been dealing with the NRC since 1969.
Wow, that's so impressive. I just like to hear a bit more about kind of this like wrong person, wrong place. Is it typically a wrong person is wrong because they don't have the right experience or the right temperament or the right leadership skills? Like what makes a wrong person?
It's all of those, but is many times somebody does good in one type of a job and they think that they can do good in something as complicated as building a nuclear power plant. In some cases, it was even operating a nuclear power plant. So they needed to have the right training, which some of them bypassed because they already were managers or so. They needed to have the right knowledge of the industry. And by right knowledge of the industry, I mean, what is this industry doing? What is the NRC doing? Is the NRC doing its job or is doing more than what it is? How do you stand up to the NRC? How do you stand up? How do you stand up to a committee in government? So I started to get involved in government as early as 1974. And so I started to write things for people in Washington, just little things that they had problems. And I just wrote, a paragraph or a page. I eventually got involved with the Freedom Act for Russia. And that was senators went and got me. And I spent months writing that. And I think maybe 20% of what I wrote made it, which is good.
That's impressive. That's incredibly impressive.
So it is actually getting there to actually help, but not to help so then people will say when you leave, we really need also, we need this. No, it's making leaders in the industry so that what the teachers leave, they say, I did it myself. I know how to do this. This is something that I can do. I understand it now. I should do it. And that was very, very, very good to hear and to do. Yes.
That's incredibly rewarding. But how did you go from, going in as a consultant, seeing maybe some issues like directly related to the NRC? Like, how'd you go from that to your chairmanship at the NRC? What was that
Well, that was a long road between me and going, but I have always been, tied into the NRC. So, for example, when TMI happened, I just happened to be licensed as a senior reactor operator by backup and Wilcox. So the NRC immediately reached out to me to look from an external body instead of those people looking with a microscope. Sometimes before you get to the microscope, you need to take a look back and see the whole thing. And then you can start, increasing the power of amplification. So I was very much involved in trying to see what happens. I understood the systems. I was trained on it. The fact I was a consultant for backup on Wilcox at the time, and I was teaching their teachers of reactor operators on what are the key safety issues and so forth. So it was easy for me to get in there, out of there. I kept the connection, and I did several things. In the middle of all this, I went to Europe and spent, actually it was a year and a half as the principal advisor to the Nuclear Safety Council of Spain. They were starting the NRC, and they were starting the NRC probably the wrong way. The first thing that they did was try to endorse all the actions the NRC have done for TMI, which half of them were wrong. So my job in Europe was to prevent not only Spain, but all the other countries to use actions taken by the NRC, which the NRC didn't like very much, but it was the right thing to do. Many years later, everybody agreed we didn't need those. Those were overreactions. And that's one thing that is a problem with nuclear regulation, or maybe with nuclear energy, is that people tend to overreact to issues that happen, and the majority of the time is because there are not enough people with sufficient in-depth knowledge of what is happening to say, hold the horses, let me find out, let me see what it is, and take the right actions. It's a difficult thing to do when people want to get going and show that they're great at doing things.
Yeah, so I guess diagnose that problem that you saw at the NRC kind of early on, both in their response to 3 Mile Island, because having that depth of knowledge, one would assume anybody at the NRC has the depth of knowledge to understand what is and isn't a risk to the public. So kind of what are those major
I don't think that's correct.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think that everybody in the NRC understands what are the real risks to the public and how does it matches with what they need to do. There are a lot of good people in there, but there are people from all characters. Many of them don't have the background in nuclear. Many of them have not been ever in a nuclear power plant. Many, so like all government agencies, there's a pool of people. Many of them are very good. Some of them are in there because they need a job. And I'm being very frank with you. And the reason is nobody can hurt me. I'm untouchable.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that there are misconceptions in the NRC. For example, I can read you one. If that interests you, it goes on to the other part of your thing. If you read the mission of the NRC, which has changed a little bit since last time I wrote it, it says the mission of the NRC is to license and regulate the nation's civilian use of byproduct source and special nuclear materials. Correct, 100% correct. But then it says in order. So all of that is in order to protect public health and safety, promote the common defense and security, and protect the environment. Wrong word. It's not in order. It is consistent with, because the main duty is not the safety. The main duty is to license and regulate the nation's byproduct source and special nuclear materials. So safety is a necessity, but it's not sufficient. You can create all the safety in the world and get zero results, none. What can you apply absolute safety to? We try over and over for years to make this point. And I always start many of my speeches. Let's see, where is my thanks? I said, if you don't know the Atomic Energy Act, you really should not be practicing nuclear engineering, or you should not be regulating. And the Nuclear Energy Act, Section 5, Paragraph 2 says, the policy of the United States says that the development, use, and control of atomic energy it doesn't say shall be regulated, it doesn't say you should, it said shall be directed as to promote world peace, improve the general welfare, increase the standard of living, and strengthen free competition in private enterprise. When was the last time you heard that?
From the NRC?
Well, but it is the fundamental cornerstone of atomic law. It is what created all of this. And it clearly, you keep reading, is that, yes, we need to have things as safety as they could be. But that's not the reason they exist. The NRC exists to license and to regulate. They don't exist to create safety. Safety is a necessity, and is safety to a level that is acceptable to its primary principles, which are to promote world peace, improve the general welfare, increase the standard of living, and strengthen free competition in private enterprise. And that's why it exists. It doesn't exist for creating safety issues. It exists for the welfare of the people of the United States and nothing else.
Definitely.
Nothing else is valid, nothing else is valuable, and nothing else is good. Does it have to have safety? Yes. But the question we always have is, how much is so much? We answer that question 50 times. And a year later, somebody's trying to go around it and change it a little bit. A little more safety, a little more safety. All to what? All in detriment of the welfare of the people of the United States. It's not all to create more safety. In reality, we have done much learning. We did need much learning, but we are missing the point. We need nuclear power. We need it in a good form, safe form. But if you make the automobile safe, you will never run another one again.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I guess the safest nuclear power plant is the one you don't build, but then you don't get the advantages that nuclear power has to offer. I couldn't agree more. So what is like a better model in your mind? Where in the world, you've traveled a lot, you helped Spain kind of build up their nuclear regulator. Where's the best model for nuclear regulation that you've seen?
We keep saying that the NRC is the best model. I am not so sure of that. Many of the Western countries, and I know them all. By the way, for 3 years, I was the chairman of the worldwide nuclear regulators of all the associations. So I know all the principal ones, or I knew all the principal ones. The bottom line is kind of a smorgasbord, because everybody tries to protect their turf, a very natural human emotion. You Yankees, you stay there, you do good things, but I do it my way. So the lack of let's call it, it's not homogenization, the lack of a model that will serve everybody, is really still missing. Because we try in 2003, I tried to implement a smaller step of that called the multinational effort, which was trying to say, okay, you regulate the power plants from the world, but building a nuclear power plant, let's approve the design. So once somebody approved it and the other approved it, it's approved by everybody. That was 2003, 20 years ago. They are still arguing about it because regulators in general are very concerned that they're going to lose some of their independence. And I think that's nonsense in the present world. I think might have been true 20 years or 40, 50 years ago, but with the visibility of anything and how everything is well known and publicized, and it just doesn't make any sense anymore. There are many things that should be kind of a standard for nuclear regulation, and that the principal one is when you actually approve, the construction of a reactor whose reactor was designed someplace else. That 98% somebody else designed it. Well, what's wrong with looking and analyzing, getting a group of nations to agree, this is a sufficient set of standards and norms to make this acceptable to whoever wants to build this reactor. And then the country that's going to build it puts the people that they need and additional, things. But the bulk of it and the bulk of the problem in nuclear is construction.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, it's not operation.
How do you?
I think we still have a way to go. There are efforts ongoing. I am all for trying to provide a certain standardization in the areas and that they can, so people will not spend their lifetime trying to find for another standard or another rule or a different thing to do.
Yeah, how do you have that degree of collaboration without, I see like two main challenges. One, it's like the turf, like my regulations are better than yours, but also it's like going to the lowest common denominator. So if we have a lot of regulators collaborating, how would you prevent them from putting like the harshest standards that are not proportional to either economics or safety? How would you, and maybe you've already thought about this in your plan, how would you make sure that that doesn't happen? Because if you put together a standardized set of regulations, but maybe they're just too high of a bar for anybody to actually meet, it won't be as effective. How have you thought through that problem?
Well, we already have in many ways tested the basic model even between ourselves. The reality is that these are doable, and if anybody tries to do less than that, that is quickly cut up. The system is set up to prevent anything that is too low. It's not set up to prevent anything that is too high, because a lot of people think this is the right thing to do. That's where we need to really put most of the effort, is to accept that regulatory structure is necessary, that an effective and efficient regulatory structure, those are two different words. Effective is not in the time domain, which means is the quality, and efficient means that something is done in the right time and the right place. There is absolutely no reason today with the things that we know for let's call it approval of a site or a nuclear power plant to take this much time. It's just wasting time. And whose time is being wasted? It's our people.
Yeah.
The citizens of the United States who are paying the price. And that's what is such an incredibly difficult problem, because people claim I am the defender of the faith. And I'm saying, no, you're not. The people need to eat. They need to eat well. They need to have the ability to be able to spend their life, to believe that they have a future. And energy is now, at this time, the cornerstone of progress. And I think we don't have it. And we're seeing it, that there are constraints in our energy infrastructure. And in order to fix it, we need something that gives us base load power at a reasonable price, or, all the time. And that requires, addressing what I'll call the four the four cornerstones of the nuclear industry, which sometimes are not as well connected as they should.
Yes, no, I definitely see that, and would be so interested to hear. So having your role at the NRC, you were there for 10 years?
Yes.
And what was kind of, talk me through that period of your career? What were some like the main highlights, but also I would be so interested to hear the lowlights. Like where did you really feel like, oh man, like we may not push through this?
Yeah. Well, when I went to the NRC, I was already a well-prepared scientist and technician.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of the most technical people that the NRC has ever seen. And it was not 1 year, it was many years in working on many reactors, in working in the repositories, in working in the mines. I have worked the entire field, all the way to the actual, nuclear utility. When I was in California, I used to go every other day to San Onofre. It's so it was a compound of experiences which I loved. I spent my time on, and I love it. So when I got there, I pretty much had an idea of what we needed to do. Of course, I was shocked by the frequent, stop. This needs to be safer. I said, well, no, the law says you don't need to be safer. Oh yeah, but we need to. I don't agree. Show me what the safety. So people will let's call it resurrect issues that I've dealt with it 40 years before, like safety during loading or reloading. Or safety while shuffling fuels, things like that, which I thought we have resolved. All of a sudden, somebody thought about it. Oh my gosh, we need to stop the power plants. You cannot load and reload. There is a major issue. I said, there's no issue.
Yep.
There's no issue. No, we need to hire the National Academy of Science, hire whoever you want. There is no issue. And I sat with a lot of them and they brought me the problems. And I would say, okay, this is how you solve this. But it costs a lot of money. It costs people to slow down. And at the end, the conclusion was, it really was no issue. Okay? But it's very hard when you have this flag that you wave around, safety, safety. We don't want to kill people or irradiate or get things. Well, where are the people that look at places like Chernobyl? Chernobyl, people think is look at the distribution of radionuclides. Look at Fukushima. Nuclei are normally heavier than the others. They tend to fall right away. This is why we can reduce the exclusion zones. We have the knowledge. What we need is the will and a proper framework that unites industry with government and maintains an independent regulator, but a regulator that is regulating the right things. It's not creating issues to slow things down.
Definitely. So that's, maybe that was a bit of a low, just like maybe the bureaucracy or like this overemphasis on safety. What was your largest accomplishment out of your time at the NRC?
I think to bring the NRC to confront their technical knowledge and background is have people stop bringing things that were pretty stupid, because I call them stupid. And they start to get a little sensitive about it. And somebody came and said, we need to shut down the power plants because the spent fuel pools are very dangerous. Okay. When was the last spent fuel pool had an accident? Well, never, but any moment now. But why? Well, it's the cooling. I say the cooling. And he says, we really have a problem with cooling. And I sat down with a piece of paper and say, what is the thermal load? And so I went on, I say, a 2-inch hose will cool your spent fuel pool. He said, that cannot be. He said, go back to your office. 2 hours later, about 20 of them showed up and say, yeah, you can do that, but it's not available now. I said, how much time before it system starts running out of water and things? He said, you don't think you can get a 2-inch hose into the spent fuel pool? I said, well, you could, but it might be the radiation. He said, what radiation? And so it is lack of depth in certain areas. There's a lot of very good, very deep, very intelligent, very knowledgeable people at the NRC and others, but sometimes they prefer to be quiet and see what happens. And I think that's wrong. I think those are the ones that needs to be speaking and saying, no, we know this and that. This project with the spent fuel pool went to the National Academy of Sciences, and I won. There was no issue. It was dropped. No issue. Then when 9/11, you asked me one of the most interesting projects that I did, it was after 9/11. Really? And it was the reality that there was a possibility, okay? Not an assurance, but a possibility that somebody could actually destroy a reactor, break the barriers, and actually create something that will not have enough coolant. And so we created what is called B5B. B5B was the response to the potential for a major sabotage, bombing, whatever you want to call it. And what we did was extremely good. It was not expensive to the point that it would bankrupt anybody, and it set up the basis of what the industry actually did better than what we did. Okay, after Fukushima, the entire industry realized we have to do this. And so what do we have now? Nuclear power plants in this country that can really laugh as a loss of coolant accident and proceed with actions and mechanisms that will keep the plant safe. And that was good. But when you act on that, this is going to destroy everything. This is just a problem. We should just shut it down. Let's study these 5 years no. And that always comes from those who have less depth.
Okay.
And in every organization, there's some of them. Like I say, I have tremendous respect for people in the NRC, but in there and in other organizations, there's always somebody that is looking for, I need to get something done, and I create this. And it's not going to wash up for much longer. And the reason is the capability that we have of researching things in a day instead of a year, and that is in our favor.
Okay, so you see like the environment or everything improving, maybe due to access or to do with like a renewed interest in nuclear. You see this issue at the NRC or maybe even more broadly in the nuclear industry as improving this over-reliance on safety?
Yeah, I think we have reached the point that we understand safety issues.
Okay.
Or the important, not that we understand everything, but I think we understand it. I think we have the measures in place. And I think that nuclear is about race or rebound. It has been, we've been saying 22, 23, 24, and it's here. However, there are, I would say the 4 things that need to come together for this to happen. I don't know if you want me to take a minute and go through them. But,
yeah, sure. No, I definitely would.
But it's very old. There's nothing new. We always say there are 4 key parts of the forming the nuclear infrastructure. And the first part is obviously you need an industry that have construction, have operation, and that takes care of the spent fuel. And there is something that is necessary, and it's good to have it, well said, which is regulation. Regulation have to be there, but it cannot be super safe or it cannot be negligent. It has to be the right balance, and it has to be, but and it has to connect with industry. It cannot be independent of industry. I mean, I got to the NRC, so somebody said, well, we don't meet with the industry anymore. I said, I'm sorry, I'm finishing with that today. I said, I'm going to pick up the phone in front of you, and I'm going to call this fellow, and I'm going to ask him to come to my office. I want to hear what he has to say. Which, what? I mean, this is treason. You're talking to the industry. No, these are the people I license. These are the people that I need to hear from. These are not somebody out there that I don't have any. I'm responsible for how they do an act. We need to talk to them, and that was a major thing. So, so industry, regulation, and then governance, which is the upper level. Politics and government, as we know, they're always there. We like to be independent of it. We can't. They have to be in there. And to be able to create the right governance, industry and regulation need to be able to work together for the welfare of the people, fight together with the government, and get things done right. And the fourth one is the most important of them. And the fourth one is economics and financing. The problems of the nuclear industry then, 1970 and now, are still, financing, economics. And we screwed it up time and time again. We did not do this thing right. Okay, I mean, it is not possible to spend 10 or 15 years building a reactor and think you have the economics. And that's why small reactors are coming. It's not because they're prettier. It's not because they're safer. People say they're safe. We can make the big reactors as safe, or just about. The issue is that you can build them in a smaller period of time and deploy them. And because you can do that, you might be able to finance it much better. So it kind of goes together. The capability of building, of putting into operation, and the financing. And there might be no way around but to have models in which things are shared. There is sharing between the vendor, the reactor vendor, and the architect engineer, and the utility. Some sharing of financial risk and profits, something that allows people to see you're putting it, in the right way. There is no doubt that this is too complex to have just a utility do it themselves. I want to make the decisions. It doesn't make any sense. No. I am the vendor. Big deal. You're the vendor. You cannot do it yourself. Well, I'm the architect, engineer. I know how to do it. But together, there'd be 3, 4, 5 institutions. They could share in the pain and in the profits. And that might be the model of the future. Somebody smart and powerful would actually get these things done. It might be that the industry decides to do it, but it's not possible to do it. This is too complex, and there are too many strings attached to everything to just get a couple of people make the decisions and you go forth. You have to be a model of risk sharing and profit sharing that drive the industry forward.
That's incredible. No, I definitely agree, and I see that. Is that something I would love to hear more about your current work at ND2? Is that something specifically you're focusing on with ND2, or is that just a side path that you're still looking forward into the future of the nuclear industry?
ND2 has, in fact, 75% of the work has been outside the last few years. I actually consult many times directly for prime ministers or president. So I have had the fortune of getting the entry point to somebody that can do something with what I say, and I love it. I love to be there, and I love somebody to hear. So I have been doing a lot of, it's not politicking, but it's a policy advisor. So, for example, I was in Abu Dhabi. I wrote a lot of the things that Abu Dhabi is doing. I was in Japan after Fukushima. Of course, I've been with the Prime Minister of Great Britain, France, Spain, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and a few other people in there, just very selected. People that wanted somebody to tell them the truth and not pull them up. And when they were finished, they don't have more bills, they just pack up and go. And I love to do that. I love to finish, pack my bags, and go. In here, I've been doing a lot of work for the utilities regarding how they interact with the public service commissions. There's sometimes many issues between the utilities and vendors that need to be resolved in a very deep manner. We're talking about issues of hundreds of millions of dollars. And so I have been doing that for more than 10 years. I actually go deep and I work for Florida Power and Light, or work for Duke, or work for Minnesota Power, or work for Bechtel. So work for architects, engineers, and issues of complex policy issues. Is what I've been doing. When the policy and the work get mixed together and there are rules to be followed, somebody has to pull them apart and show them where they belong and how they fit. And that's what I do. I love it.
That's exciting. And you're doing that policy work in the US and internationally?
Yes.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah. And this is maybe a bit specific, but I'm sure you're aware that Poland has actually rewritten a lot of their atomic law recently. Do you have any thoughts on that recent news?
No, I really have not seen it. I knew some guys that were working in there, but they're all gone now. It's a new generation. So I don't know anybody in there. I haven't looked at it, but I might.
Yeah, I would highly recommend. Yeah, it's really interesting what they're doing over there. Exactly as you're talking about, being much more focused on how the industry and regulators need to come together so that the regulations are aligned to actually bringing plants online quickly. So yeah, highly recommend taking a look at that. But I guess what are kind of those critical issues? It looks like there's a lot of progress. There's a lot of interest, especially in the small reactors. But what critical issues do we need to resolve in order to have the nuclear power industry really be all that it could be?
Well, I think, and some people are not going to like this, but one of the issues is that eventually we need to reduce the number of reactors that are in the marketplace. We cannot support 500 concepts. Be nice, but we can't. And so what it does is, to me, it kind of slow down. So I think that the knowledgeable industry and experts needs to start reducing to those who are more economically viable, that offer more advantages in different parts of the power cycle, that are attracting the funding. We cannot do it all. And we went through this. And were not even born in 1962. 1962, the Atomic Energy Commission was being faced with the fact that there were some 50 concepts floating around, and there was only so much money. And there was the director of the atomic, not the commissioner or the chairman, but he actually got enough power to say enough. We can't do any more. We're only going to do light water reactors and fast reactors. That's it. Okay. And somebody said, "Oh," he said, but if you have a limited amount of money, what do you rather do? Do a good one that will stand the test of time, or spread it around, and 20 years from now we're still asking which is the best one? So I think the industry need to focus on selecting a number that are viable. We don't want just we're going to select one. No, that's not correct. But there will be those who have a definite advantage, and we practically know which ones they are. I'll tell you. I'll charge you for it.
I was gonna say, yeah, I have my own ideas about what the best reactor technology type is like, especially for near-term deployment. But I'd be really interested to hear what you think both the ideal number or the ideal type of reactor is.
But to finish, the second thing is we need to, besides just having a reactor or having a company having this, we need to develop how do we put these things in place. How do we tie, the issues of economics, personnel, all of those things that need to happen and happen well. I live in a time in where it was not strange to have a reactor being built for 20 years. I lived them. It was not building the reactor. It's trying to get around all the other problems. They didn't have the money, they didn't have this happened, an accident happened. There was always something. There was always lack of foresight. A group in the industry need to have the foresight to set the indispensable elements to go forth well set and have those reactors that are worth it to go forward under that set, because other sets will not work. We have proven it over and over again that we can do it. Right now, France, spending 13 years and us 10 years building a reactor. That's just crazy. Crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, we were not ready. We then decided not to do it. Georgia Power are wonderful people. I love them all, but they were not ready to take over the reactor, and they shouldn't be ready. They're a utility. They're not an architect engineer. They're not a vendor. So how do we not start a reactor unless we have all the pieces in place? Don't start it. Don't try it, because it won't work. We have proven it in this country over and over again that it will not work. There was a time in 1971 when I was a principal consultant of Exxon Nuclear. Exxon, people don't even know there was an Exxon Nuclear.
Yeah, I was unaware.
And the first question that came was, what should a model to build nuclear power plants contains? And I said, well, let me see, what are you following now? I said, we don't have one. I said, what? You're trying to, we don't have one. We want you to build one. I said, I'm nobody. I'm a kid. I don't know. What are you asking me for? I mean, you get the right people, you get them together and you drill through it for a year and then you build a model. And we might still need to do that now.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder who is best positioned. You kind of talked about three distinct groups. You have your industry, you have government officials, and then I would separate regulators out like from the government. Which one of those stakeholders, or a fourth I don't know about, is best positioned to put forward a model, whether it's around financing, the technology, or the regulation? Like, who is best positioned to set that framework?
The industry, assuming they realize that they have to do it properly, with a proper assessment and the proper things, they are the ones to do it. And then they need to convince the politicians, or at least, a majority of them, that this is the right place. And then they need to convince the financing. Because the last thing they need to do is convince the utilities. There will be utilities and governments to do it. But you have to be able to do that. And it has to be able to do, not as a private matter, I'm going to do this and I'm going to keep it in here. No, do it in the open. Let people know that you're doing the right things. Let everybody see that there is transparency and there is knowledge and that things have been weighted, and that puts out a model that can be done and be taken forward.
Wow, that's incredible. You've given me a lot of interesting ideas and a lot of hope for the future of the industry. I wanted to see if you had a final message to share with our listeners about the future.
I love the nuclear industry. I could have been something else, and I stuck with it. I still am.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Titans of Nuclear, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Take care.
And initiate at least a new approach to the many difficult problems that must be solved in both private and public conversation if the world is to shake off the inertia imposed by fear and is to make positive progress toward peace.